certified life coaches with 45 years combined experience in human resources, Jen Trumm and Katherine have both experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, both personally and professionally. What they both know to be true is this: our mental, physical, and emotional health are the essential building blocks in order to thrive and shine in the field of HR. In a first of its kind podcast, we'll be getting real, and we'll discuss and share what has contributed to both our success and struggles, with the goal of inspiring women around the globe to stand tall and take the necessary action to both thrive and shine in HR. Here are your hosts, Jen and Katherine. Well, hello, Jen. Hello, listeners. How are we doing on this fine Thursday? We're recording live for the first time in a long time. It's October 3rd, 6:45 Mountain Time. It's 5:45 where Jen is on the Pacific Coast.
Episode 33.
Yes.
Did you get the number 3?
Is there a better number? Is there a better number? I don't know. I don't know. So we are live. I am looking at our streams. It looks like, Jen, we are live in the Women of HR Support group, which is fantastic. Looks like we are live Instagram. It looks like a lot of mine didn't work, so I'm just going to have to repost this, which is fine. Jen,
oh man,
listen, I mean, we know that the keys, the like RTMBM keys, whatever the software keys, it's difficult. It's difficult to post live. So we're definitely gonna make it happen for this next round. How are you doing? How's your week been?
It's been a little bumpy, but that's okay. I feel like it's been one of those weeks that have really tried me emotionally, and yet has really challenged my curiosity.
Yes.
This subject today I'm so excited about because I think we all, I think, have such an opportunity sometimes, especially when we're really challenged with wild circumstances, to lean in, become a little more curious. So yeah, that's been going on everywhere I look, everywhere around me at work, everywhere around at home. It's just been like, oh, this is new. This is different. A lot of that going on. That's really, just required me to slow down a little bit and just pay attention to some of the details that maybe I would typically miss. So all is good, but definitely I feel a little bit more on the jittery side than I think I normally would be. So I'm like, okay, just hold on. You're going to be fine.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what I love about our podcast. We are completely open about our emotional and our mental health on this podcast.
Yeah.
And our jobs in HR take their toll, and it can have a ripple effect into our personal lives and vice versa. And we're not here to say, like, do it this way so it's easy, because it just isn't always easy. But what can we do, right, to do better, be better, feel better, all those types of things, especially when life gets tough and going gets tough. So good for you. I love your advice. And it wasn't even advice, but I'm taking it as advice. Slow down and pay attention to the details. I love that. That was episode's done. We're out of here.
Well, definitely, when the is starting to hit the fan, I've really noticed that that's typically when everything starts to go really fast, like everything, you're in hyper mode.
Yes.
And if I can take a moment and slow that down a little bit, it's really important for me.
Absolutely.
That's something I've noticed over these last few years, is like, all right, slow down a clip, just
100%.
Take a minute. And so that's where I'm at. I feel like I'm in a little bit slow motion right now with everything else around kind of being in chaos. I'm like, I'm
even thinking back to our recent podcast where we talked about the difference between reactive HR and responsive HR. And
Yeah.
when we're reacting to the storm. We're reacting to Hurricane Helene.
Yeah.
We are sort of allowing for that craziness. We just dive right in, as opposed to being responsive and staying in the eye of the storm and
Mhm.
letting it just swirl around us, but just slowing down. And I think about when managers or leaders in our organizations come to us and say, I need to fire this person right now, right? I mean, that just, when somebody comes in hot, that's when we need to slow down. So I
Yes.
just think it's really interesting, because anytime we're trying to move quickly, I think that is our cue right then
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
actually need to do the opposite. And
Yeah.
it very much aligns with today's podcast about curiosity too, which is going to be so fun. So Jen, curiosity, we're episode 33. Curiosity, the number one HR leadership skill you must master. Do you think it's the number one skill? I'm curious. Do you agree with the title of our podcast today?
Oh my gosh. You know what? Like I hadn't thought of that before you asked the question. And so I'm like, oh, I mean, there are so many skills that are important to master, but I would definitely say curiosity is going to be in my top 3 to 5 for sure. So
Whoa,
I'd have
yeah,
to spend a minute, but and curiosity to me is so much about that taking a moment and really acknowledging that I don't have all the answers, and that's okay. Right? Like I think that so often, especially in HR, and we've talked about this
oh
before,
yeah,
there is this sense of I can't let them see, I can't let others see that I may not know it all, like I don't have it all. And
yeah,
so what I think is one of the most powerful superpowers that I've really accumulated over the past few years is to be able to say, I don't know. I'm not sure. And to be able to do so in a way that is, it's not a big deal, right?
mm-hmm.
It's not a big deal because I care to find it. I care to like see this through. It'd
Yes,
be one thing if I don't know and I don't give a F you, right? That would be one thing, but that's not what we're talking about. And so
mm-hmm.
yeah, so I think, the curiosity that I've gained over the last couple of years is to really be able to say, if there's a difference of opinion, if there is a disconnect in some way, what does it hurt me to just lean into it, to ask about it, to
Yep,
understand a little bit more?
yep,
Is that really going to hurt me? Right? Is that going to cause me pain in some way? No, typically it's, that it's just easier to think we know the answer. And then going beyond that is going to require us to possibly be wrong.
yep,
So, yeah. So it gets nuanced, right? It can get so
yes,
nuanced because it requires us to like step outside of our ego and do all these things that I know we'll
yes,
probably get more into as we go into the questions today. So I
yeah,
think it's just a matter of starting from a place of I don't know it all. And therefore, in order to at least make an effort, I have to lean in.
yeah.
That's what I got. How about you?
I think that's huge. And I want to highlight that before we dive into the questions. I love this because I have so many, when I teach HR Empower Hour every single Tuesday, and with my one-on-one coaching program, I find that so many HR professionals struggle because we feel like in this instantaneous world, in this instantaneous society, we have to give answers right away. And if we don't, then we're not actually the HR expert.
Mm-hmm.
And we judge ourselves, and we are guessing at what other people are thinking of us when we don't give the answer on the spot. And so I help my clients with this all the time. What you just said, it's
Yeah.
slow down. It's okay not to have the answer on the spot.
Yeah.
And one of the techniques I use personally is to say, I want to make sure when I answer this question that you've just asked, I want to make sure that I understand the question to the fullest. So there comes the curiosity, because I usually follow up with a lot more questions just to make sure I understand the question. But then I ask permission. I really want to make sure I give you a solid, comprehensive answer. Would you mind if I took some time? to really think this through, work through it. And obviously, this isn't, sometimes we can give very, if we're answering a question about Title VII, what's covered under Title VII, we can probably rattle that off. But if you can't, that's okay. It's okay to say, you know what? I don't want to misspeak. So let me do a little bit of research and get back to you. It's absolutely okay, because then they trust you to be the human resources professional. You're going to be resourceful and find the correct and accurate answer, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. You just made me think about that. And to take it even one step further, I am doing work. I've been working in Southern Colorado for, I don't know, the last almost 2 years now. And I've started working with a new municipality. And we were actually live. I don't know if you, like, town councils are recorded live. I'm sure this happens in large municipalities as well. But we are live. We are being recorded. And I was getting hammered in such a good way with questions, because I was the HR professional that they had brought in to help with the mediation, but also now I'm recruiting for the highest level position in their organization. And they were firing questions at me. And the first couple of questions, I was hitting right back with answers, right? I wanted to be the expert. They're paying me a lot of money. It was recorded live. The whole community's watching. And slowly but surely, I started taking my own advice and just slowing down, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where the curiosity of, okay, where's this question actually coming from? I think that's another thing that we tend to lack, that curiosity in ourselves, but also that curiosity of, why is this person actually asking this question? Is there a question underneath this question? That type of thing. So anyway, totally off topic, but not really, because it's all curiosity. Okay, so Jen, most of our listeners already know this, but you and I take turns preparing these questions. So this week, it was my turn. I'm so excited to ask these questions. Not going to lie, used a little chat GPT because I was like, ooh, I want to spice it up this week. So
right on.
Jen, I know, right? Why do you believe curiosity is essential for effective leadership in HR, in our chosen field?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think it really comes down to when we can start stripping away our ego when it comes to how we are perceiving a situation. So to be human is to judge it, to one of the things humans do just naturally is to look at a situation, to, kind of take from what we see the circumstances to be, and then make a best guess assessment, right? These are the things that are constantly just happening within our brain without us even thinking about it. And I think what ends up happening is as soon as we come up with that answer, deal's done. Right? The deal's done. My brain already, kind of fabricated whatever it came up with. And now I'm solid. And the problem with that is that we've never really been given the skills to question that. We've really kind of been left to our own devices that those initial assumptions that we're making are accurate and they're truth. Right. Yep. And so the problem with that is that it's not often, right? I don't remember the statistics and I was going to look it up, and today has not been the day where I ended up doing any homework. So I literally am going on the fly here with all
love this, Jen. Yes.
But I know that the statistics are right there that basically says that, when we are faced with circumstances, my gosh, my brain just drew a blank.
It's been a long day when we're faced with the circumstances.
Yeah. So the challenge is that we have to question ourselves, and questioning ourselves is not comfortable because our gut instinct is to believe what our first story is.
Oh, yeah.
That is not serving you, and it's not serving anyone else around you a lot of the time, whatever that statistic is, right? And so that reality of, that being something that has been a misunderstanding in my own life has then challenged me. And then the coming up with that truth, right, is one thing, but it's a whole other thing to take that truth and then say, okay, what are you going to do with it? Right now, what?
Yes.
And for me, the role that I'm currently in, being on this podcast, there's so many areas in my life where I'm actually taking action with that. And then what? Question. And that's so
Mm-hmm.
powerful, and it's so exciting, and it's so scary at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that that's really where the curiosity comes in, is like and then what? Because it's actually then going into it and saying, okay, I may not have had this right. I may not have had the answers as well as I thought maybe I did. And therefore I've got to lean into it. And
Yeah.
then I actually need to take some action, because once I've leaned in and I actually do have that bigger perspective on the other side of the story or whatever it is, now what? Right? You can't unsee once you've seen. You can't unknow once you've known. So I think in the HR realm, it's one of the reasons why it's so hard to go into that and so hard to actually open that door, because then it's, and then what?
Yeah.
So that's my long ramble of an answer without.
I love that answer, though. I love that answer because, oh my gosh, I mean, I think before I went into coaching school, before I understood how the brain worked, I literally believed the thoughts that I was choosing.
Yeah.
So, for example, HR Empower Hour, I have a bunch of members in HR Empower Hour, and I'm thinking about so many of them as you're just talking. One woman in particular had a lot of narratives going about her former boss, a lot of judgment going about her former boss. And we really worked through, okay, those are the initial thoughts that you're choosing. You know, are you really being curious? Or are you being judgmental? And is that helpful or is that not helpful? Yeah. So I think about that, you know, what are the stories, the beliefs, the thoughts we're choosing about maybe how a boss, let's just say this is one of my favorite examples to use because I think we can all relate to this. You send out an email to your boss. You took a lot of time, and it's something you really feel passionately about that maybe is, I don't want to say contentious, but your boss has argued a contrary point in the past. Let's just say, you know, you're like, I want to buy this HRIS system for this reason. And your boss is saying, absolutely not. We're sticking with the one we have, whatever it is. You plead your case via email and you don't hear back. Maybe it's not with your boss. Maybe it's with a coworker. Maybe it's with an employee. Maybe it's with somebody you extended an offer to and you're saying, you know, we can't quite go to 65,000. We have to stick at 60,000. And here's why, whatever it is. And we don't hear back from people. We start making up narratives, what that lack of communication means. Oh, they're ghosting me. Oh, they have another job offer. Oh, they actually just want to stay with their current employer and use this as leverage to get a promotion. Like, we come up with the craziest stories. And I think once, I can only speak for myself, once I learned those are just narratives. Those are just first thoughts. Those are just first initial stories. It is okay to get curious about those thoughts versus, well, I think that awareness is really important. But once you have that awareness, it's that curiosity that's really important. And you hit the nail on the head. And I have a slightly nuanced way of looking at this. What are you making it mean? Be really curious. Like, what are you making that mean? And if my father's been in intensive care. He's been at PCU, ICU for the last 11 days straight. So instead of working as a coaching consultant, I have really been focused on my family the last 11 days. And I think back to the judgment I had on my dad growing up and what I made his 7-day-a-week, 12 to 16-hour work days mean, right? I felt neglected. I felt unloved, all those types of things. But at 45 years old, 4 years ago, I was still choosing those thoughts. And once I learned to get curious about my own thoughts about my relationship with my dad at 45 years old, quite literally, my narrative changed about my dad overnight. I started having different conversations with my dad. I started owning that narrative and saying, Dad, I got to tell you what I've been telling myself for the last 30 years of my life.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, that's interesting, Katherine. He's so cute. He's 82, right? And because I made that shift 4 years ago, I am so close with my dad.
Oh.
And life has not been easy within our family for the last year. And my dad listened and has just been there for me. And it's all because I stopped judging my dad and I started getting curious. Swear on my life.
I love that so much.
It's so good. So good. So good. Anyway, back to HR. But what I love about this podcast, I mean, everything we talk about applies both in our personal lives and our professional lives. So
Absolutely.
I guess I already led out with a personal one, but what about an example of a time, Jen, where curiosity has really positively impacted an HR initiative or decision that you had to make in your professional experience as an HR practitioner?
Yeah. You know, when I was working in the hospitality industry and I worked with the gal, I think I shared a little bit on the podcast previously. I worked with a gal who was the first person who introduced me to meditation. And
Yes.
during that time, we would have one-on-ones together occasionally. Sometimes we were talking about work, but almost always we would end up talking a little bit about what is mindfulness and how then I was starting to notice, it was really interesting. I was starting to notice that when it came to conflict at home, when it came to conflict with my kids, I was starting to notice that I wasn't getting quite as triggered. And so then we would talk about that. And she would say, yeah. So she would ask me questions. She would ask me like curiosity questions, kind of just pulling it out. And I didn't realize it at the time. It didn't quite catch until much later. But basically, she was basically pulling out from me that through mindfulness, it was teaching me curiosity. It was teaching me how to slow it down a little bit, not take things quite so personally, to just regulate, right? And that's really the key of mindfulness, is to find a regulation, because it is absolutely impossible as a human species to not get triggered. It's impossible, right? And so the key, the superpower of being human is what we do with it, how we react to it, and how quickly we can catch our reactivity in a way that's much more proactive and responsible.
Yeah.
And so I think, from that perspective that she started to teach me, that was the beginning of my path. But really, it didn't fully click until a couple of years ago, which we've talked about lots of times now.
Amazing.
It really, for me, was those moments with her and then the one-on-ones we were having. And all of a sudden, I was kind of making those connections. It was starting to, like, the synapses were firing. I was like, oh my God, that makes sense. I didn't scream at Mike like I used to, and this or that. And then it just slowly started to build more and more. And what's so interesting is you and I have talked before about both of us being pretty fiery. About things. And so with mindfulness, as I've been able to tame the beast, it's almost, I can get a little silly in my curiosity too, which I really think is funny, because occasionally, if I would have gotten triggered about something like this, happened to me at work not too long ago, where I know me of a couple years ago, or whatever. And so something happened where I started just giggling, and one of the managers was like, well, what's wrong? And it wasn't the manager who, would have upset me. It was somebody who wasn't in the room, but I just recognized the trigger that I no longer have. And it's kind of, it can be just fun, to have that happen and to be like, oh, bless my heart,
Yeah.
like, I can totally like see how I'm no longer triggered in the same way I would have been. So yeah,
Wow.
I think the curiosity piece is really that beautiful part that through the use of the skill of curiosity, that's where then it's like a flower that opens up, right?
Mm.
Because now you're like, oh, now I see what that other possibility was that I never would have considered before.
That is so good. It's so good, especially as we talk about our mental and emotional health.
Yeah.
Just the power of a technique through meditation, just that has been proven to calm the
Yeah.
brain and help us tap into the prefrontal cortex that allows us to think critically, as
Yeah.
opposed to just, allowing those triggers. I mean, talk about what are we making a trigger mean? You and I have talked about this a million times where I'm like, thank God I just got triggered. Now I know I have work to do. And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
so freaking grateful because I know what my body does when I'm triggered. P.S. It's been happening as I'm sitting on the couch in between my mom and my dad at the hospital. You bet your ass I've been getting triggered. And I'm like, cool. Yep, here it is. And it's hard. It is hard.
I
And I'm like,
totally, my heart goes out to you.
I mean, my heart goes out to you. I feel the exact same way.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this is easy. I don't think you and I ever preach that things are easy. It's just there's a different way to go about HR in a much more empowered way, a much more eyes opened kind of way. And triggers are just one of the things. Instead of diving into that victim mentality, it's like, oh, here it is again. So I just have more work to do on it. Totally.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
not easy. Not easy. I mean, as you were talking, what was coming up for me, kind of a different example, very different example, is I think about the glass ceiling. I think about all the narratives that could be true, fact-based narratives of the old boys club is trying to suppress women. And that was a narrative that I had in my head during my last 5 years in the 9 to 5 realm of HR. My pay was pretty abysmal comparatively to men in the same pay grade that I was in. Long story short, I was in the private sector. I switched over to the public sector. And I was very, very judgmental of the systems that were in place, the decisions that were being made about executive level pay in the organization I was in. And by the way, I would weigh in as the HR person. I would say, okay, here's my quantification, my quantitative analysis, my qualitative analysis. Here's where I think the person should be brought in. And my boss at the time would override me every single time with white men and bring them in higher. I mean, this is just factual. It is documented. This
Damn.
right. But here's the interesting part about this is I was doing the usual thing that I've done my whole life. That's okay. I put everybody else first. That's okay. We don't have to address my compensation now. And I did that for 5 years until I broke. But here's the part about the glass ceiling that I find interesting. There is a glass ceiling for women in particular, right? And we are all working very, very diligently and consistently to shatter that glass ceiling. There's also sticky floors. And the sticky floors are the narratives in our head. And the sticky floors for me were the thoughts that I was choosing, judging my situation, such as I live in an affluent community where the wages aren't that great. I better hold on to this job for dear life because there aren't a lot of high paying HR jobs out there. So who cares that the old boys club is keeping you down and hiring white men way above what you're earning after 25 years in HR, right? So my sticky floor were the thoughts that I was having. You better hold on for dear life.
Yeah.
And once I started getting curious about that thought, why am I choosing the thought of hold on for dear life? It opened up all new possibilities. I ditched the 9 to 5 world. I started my coaching and consulting business.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it's okay to like money as women. It is okay to like money. And I have made so much money through just delivering so much value to HR professionals all over the world, truly, that I can't believe I once settled for the thought of you better hold on to those, low six figures. Hold on for your dear life. Because my income now is like I've blown that up.
Hmm.
So I bring this up very specifically because I think it's very common for HR women in particular to say, nope, give the raises to the operational side of the business, give
Mhm.
the raises to my team. And it's okay to say, to challenge that narrative and get curious about your own narrative, get curious about the glass ceiling. But even more importantly, get curious about the sticky floors, get curious about the thoughts that are keeping you stuck and disempowered.
I love
Wild.
that sticky floors. I have not heard
Oh,
that before. That's fabulous.
I haven't used it in a couple years. It just what something you said triggered the sticky. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember my sticky floor syndrome.
I love that. I'm definitely taking that with me.
It's a fun one. It's a fun one. Well, what about how curiosity can help HR leaders navigate challenges when dealing specifically with conflict resolution and change management? So let's get right into some very traditional sections or functions of HR when it comes to conflict resolution, when it comes to change management. I feel like those are things we're always dealing with in the HR space. How
Hmm.
does curiosity help us as leaders navigate those challenges that come up over and over again in our work life?
Yeah. Well, conflict and change are going to be a little different in terms of how I would approach curiosity. But
Ooh,
from a conflict space, I think
yeah.
curiosity is such a fascinating thing because so often I think in the HR space, there is a tendency to want to just solve and move on, right? To fix and solve and be, like ultimately it's an aversion to conflict. It's an aversion to discomfort. And so, when you really start to dive into why it's such a difficult thing for a lot of people in HR to really sit with it and have that space for however uncomfortable it gets. And that's why, and I've talked about it before on the podcast, that I'm such a huge proponent of like bringing the people to the table as quickly as possible with conflict, to not
Yes.
have these
Yes.
circles here and the circles here and that sort of thing. Because
Yes.
the transparency is everything when it comes to trust and safety. It's everything. And so
Yes.
why are you going to try to have transparency when you don't have everybody in the same room? And it's amazing, company to company to company to company that I've worked for throughout my career, how often that happens, because people were like, well, I'm just not really comfortable, maybe talking to them about it. And it's this discomfort of the conflict. And it's
Yeah.
like, I totally get that. And so I have become pretty darn skilled at really helping people through that, in order
Yes.
to recognize that the only way we're really going to get to the heart of this is to be able to have everything out on the table. And
Yes.
and so then that requires me to help them understand why we need more curiosity, and that you just can't get to the heart of that with it half baked.
Yep. I could not
Right.
agree
And so
more.
so yeah, I think that's for me what matters so much is you've got to be able to be willing to go to the heart of it. So that's the conflict side. And
Yes.
for the change side, I think it's that aversion or that discomfort of change, right? That
Yep.
it's a discomfort place. And from that, it's really about like pushing to kind of push through whatever obstacles are causing the discomfort and causing the hesitation. So Yeah, and so it's a matter of like dissecting sometimes what's causing the reluctance from
Oh,
wanting to
yes.
go into, the discomfort, because
Yeah.
that curiosity is always, it's always. I don't know about you, Kathy. Have you ever really leaned in to curiosity and not found it, at least initially, uncomfortable? It's going to always have that, almost always, because it's the unknown.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's where, you've got to be willing to sign up for it. And if you're not willing to sign up for it, and it's the times where we're not, that it ends up then creating this this process of dragging things on, and not really getting to the root of things, because now we're kind of sidestepping and, going around the bush, and you know,
Yep.
sweeping under the rug and whatever else. So yeah, I think you got to be willing to go there. And so yeah. What about you when it comes to change, when it comes to conflict?
Yeah.
Where do you see curiosity? And I'd love to hear your perspective, and I hope it's different than mine.
It's the same, but I think I'm going to explain it a little. It's totally the same, actually. I want to start with change management because I couldn't agree more. When you were talking, I was thinking about Paul Stoltz's work.
Mm,
And I'm not going to remember the name, but he has done so much work on adversity. And his work shows that some humans have a stronger inclination to avoid adversity, avoid change,
mhm,
um, versus some people really harness it and they welcome it. And you hit the nail on the head when you said you have to figure out why somebody is in that avoidant mode, right? They're so reluctant to change. And
mhm,
that's the whole point of that skill of curiosity.
right.
And what fascinates me so much is, it's not necessarily one or the other. It's not just avoidance and just harnessing. There's a whole scale in between. There's coping, there's managing. He's got this 5-tiered scale. I don't want to go too much into it. But I just experienced this with an organization that I was hired to be their interim town manager. We called it a town manager transition consultant because the town manager was leaving. The mayor, I had met her, I'd been working with this organization for a while, and she said, "Would you consider stepping in at the highest level of the organization to lead it?" And I said, "Absolutely," because I saw it as such an opportunity to really, honestly, to just coach all the time, because I know that that's what really generates really powerful results. And I was thinking about Paul Stoltz's work. I was actually doing a director's retreat as this announcement was being made in the company. And there were directors, this huge change, right? This beloved town manager was leaving. And some of the directors were very gracious. They didn't want him to go. Everyone really, really loved this person. And there were some people who were like, "Don't want you to go, and I really respect your decision." And more in the, I wouldn't say harnessing necessarily, but immediately accepting and providing support and looking ahead and saying, "Okay, what do we need to do to keep this momentum going that we have built to be a world-class organization?" Right? We've
Mhm.
got somebody leaving who's very instrumental, provides that leadership. How do we keep it going? There were other people on the end of that, that I don't know. I don't know what you call it. I'm thinking of like a xylophone right now. That's not even the right term. You know what I'm saying? Like on this other, what's that?
Like a spectrum?
Like a spectrum.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And just all the way over here in this denial, this
Oh, yeah.
avoidance, and also low emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Just not aware of how detrimental that avoidant behavior, that resistant behavior was,
Mhm.
especially when you're a director.
Mhm.
But I think what is so unhelpful in those types of situations where your leadership is changing is to come in hard with judgment.
Mhm.
Why are you crying all the time? Why are you so upset? That type of thing. And we do that. We judge, and that judgment comes from fear. And I think that fear is just so hardwired in us, in our amygdala. We've talked so much about this on the podcast. And I think being curious, being that HR leader, when you are experiencing turnover in your organization, it's really paramount to be curious about why people are leaving, why people are responding to people leaving, and
Mhm.
just lead with that curiosity. And it's absolutely a skill. And I love, Jen, that you said you really sort of mastered it because you've had a lot of experience. And I think you said you had more, more mastery when it comes to conflict resolution. You practiced it. You practiced the skill of curiosity. And I love that.
Mhm.
So I love that.
Yeah.
Um, I know I only answered the change management portion of it, but it was kind of a long answer.
Well, in terms of conflict, though, do you see curiosity kind of show up for you? I mean, how does it show up for you when you are, because you do mediations and
Oh,
things
yeah.
pretty
Oh,
often.
yeah.
How does curiosity show up for you as mediator?
I mean, as a mediator, it really helps me check any conscious or unconscious bias that comes up.
Nice.
It really does. And it's so funny because in HR Empower Hour today, we do coaching on Thursdays. One of the women, she's out in California. She just went through an investigation workshop. She and I are kindred spirits. We
Hmm.
love workplace investigation. She went to go get certified. We all know California has its own, it's its own beast, right?
Yeah.
And she was talking about the most impactful thing she learned, because we talk about essential leadership skills. We talk about the skill of curiosity often in HR Empower Hour. And she said, leading the witness. She said that was something that when it comes to workplace investigations, when it comes to conflict, you don't want to be leading in any way by the questions that you're asking.
Yeah.
And so my initial thought was, well, yeah, that's exactly why you ask HQQs, which we've covered in the podcast before. Like, ask those high quality questions that are coming from that place of curiosity versus judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And so long as you're doing so much more asking, I think you avoid that leading. I think you avoid really staying as the UN and as that neutral party. And I also think something you brought up is when it comes to conflict resolution, I wrote down 3 words: choose your hard. And here's what I mean by choose your hard. I think when there's conflict, and you were talking about avoidance,
Mm-hmm.
and you stick to that narrative, that judgmental narrative of the other person, or even as HR. I mean, maybe you're like, ooh, I don't want to deal with this. I think it's going to be hard either way. So you got to choose your heart. And do you want it prolonged over months of time because you're sticking to this narrative? Or do you want to get curious about the situation as the HR practitioner trying to resolve it? Do you want to teach that skill of curiosity with those 2 people who are in conflict? I'm just assuming, using a generalization. It's usually between 2 people.
Mm-hmm.
And do you really want to prolong it and live in conflict? Or do you want to get curious and help the other people get curious about one another? It's going to be hard. That is a hard thing to do, to sit as an active listener when your brain just naturally wants to judge and judge and judge and judge and stick with that negativity bias.
Yeah.
So it's going to be hard, but I promise you, if you address conflict, Jen, just like you were saying, address it quickly. Do not sweep it under the rug, because it's going to be hard, but may it be harder for a shorter amount of time.
Yeah.
Because chances are you're going to see the humanness in the other person. And once you see that humanness, you can't unsee it, just like you opened up this episode with, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's just so, so powerful when it comes to conflict resolution. It's just like, sit in that curiosity. And you will probably see things you never expected to see. It's one of the coolest things I think about coaching.
Yeah.
When I'm just sitting in pure curiosity, my clients, hour after hour, day after day, I am blown away by their answer, because I'm not anticipating an answer. I'm not sitting in judgment. I'm truly curious about what's going to come out of their mouth. And sometimes I'm just like, never saw that one coming. And that's when I know I'm sitting in true curiosity.
Yeah.
True curiosity. I'm not thinking, oh, what's going to come out of their mouth. I'm just like an open slate,
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I think it's not even a probably thing for me in terms of like really being
Oh,
blown away by having the willingness to be curious. It's an always, there's
oh,
always things I'm learning. It's just, it's fun to have a mindset of curiosity because it can be a real joyful thing. And you don't have to attach yourself to that then meaning anything about you. And I think that that's one of the things that as humans we do way too much is we cause sometimes these judgments that we feel like others are making or we make of ourselves or whatever to actually then, mean something. And
yep,
yeah, so I think the process of becoming more curious, I think, can help release that because none of that's real. None of that's really real. It's really just all these stories that we have to release, and through the process of curiosity, we can learn to do that. So
totally.
pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think about my clients who've been let go from jobs and what they've made that mean. And when they continue to judge themselves, they carry around that shame. When they judge the person who let them go or the organization, you literally are carrying that around. And I just think about like that 25-pound weight at the gym, and you're carrying that around, and that gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And when
Yeah.
you just get curious about why am I making getting fired be a bad thing? What if this was actually the best thing that's ever happened for me because it allowed me to go find an organization where my values were aligned or whatever that is, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I love that you just brought that up, that heaviness. It's
Yeah.
really self-induced. It's self-induced, and you can flip the script on it at the drop of a hat and drop that 25-pound weight that you've been carrying for 20 years. It's wild. All through curiosity.
Yeah. It is, and you got to start somewhere,
Yeah.
And I think having that realization sometimes can be really jarring for people, but it's
Yeah.
okay. It's a part of the process to be able to say, okay, I need to start making some changes,
Yes.
and when better than today.
When better than today? If not when, then how? No, that's not right. If not now, then when?
If not now, then when? Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
Yes.
well, when you think about strategies, what strategies do you recommend for HR professionals to cultivate curiosity of themselves and within themselves? Do
Mhm.
you have a strategy?
Yes.
Oh, tell
I
me.
do. It's practice. Practice,
Oh,
practice, 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 practice.
yes.
It's
Yes.
it's 100% practice. It's about becoming intentional around where curiosity could serve you in whatever it is, right? If in the workplace you're noticing that you really are struggling because you're not strong in the accounting and the finance. That just came. Okay, here's something funny.
Oh, do
So
it.
I got voluntold at my job that I'm
Yeah.
going to be on the finance committee. So
Oh,
at our company, because we're run by a board of directors, there
yes.
are different committees. You have a strategic initiatives committee. I want to be on that one, by the way. You've got an EDI committee, which is our equity, diversity, and inclusion committee. I'm on that one
Okay.
because I'm HR. That makes sense. You've got, I don't know, multiple different committees. Finance committee is one of the committees that you have, a few board members and other people. And it's my turn. So different managers get to be on different committees at different times. And so I I got the short straw. But anyway, this committee is challenging me bad. I mean, I went to college, I got educated, but
Yeah.
when it comes to debits and credits and all of that, it was not my strength. I got a
Yeah.
B minus. I think I made it through okay, but
Yeah.
it's not my strength. So my finance manager, I called him up the other day. We were having a finance committee meeting. I called him up and I said, "Hey, Mel, can I come over? Can you spend 15 minutes before the meeting today? And
Mhm.
can you just help me with what are the most important things that I need to know that's going to help me feel like I can get through at least what we're going to be going over today, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, that he was really impressed by that because one, I had no shame. I
Yep.
had no shame. I just said, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I need to know. Can you just spend 15 minutes with me and help me not feel stupid?
Yeah.
and yeah, so not only did I not have shame, but he felt really like it made him feel really good about himself that he was able to like teach me rather than him going into it and thinking that perhaps I know what I'm talking about and he doesn't want to mansplain. So we had
Yes.
a really great conversation where he was,
Yeah.
I don't know what you don't know, and I don't want to assume you don't know. So, anyway, I was like so proud of that. And that just happened this week where I just said, pause for one
Yeah.
moment. Can you help me with this? And boy, am I really happy I did because being someone who does not understand finance very well at all, now I do a little bit more, and at
Love
least when it comes
that.
to the co-op, I feel like I'm not a complete idiot.
Uh, which you're not, Miss MBA. You can't have an MBA and be a complete idiot. Sorry, doesn't work that way.
Well, it was a B minus, so it literally was me not paying attention as fully as I could have. So here I am 20 years later, pretty much practically 20 years later,
Wow.
and able to pick it up at least somewhat. So,
I love that.
well,
Through
what about you?
practicing and
Like when
through
you're so
asking for help. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah. So what
Love
about
it.
you? Well, the practice and the asking for help. So
Yep.
those are my two strategies. What
So
about
big.
you? What are your strategies?
I mean, what's coming up is not an HR example, but I'm going to use it anyway because I think we can all relate to this one because I think so many of us, we do judge our bosses and we judge people who are pulling into the wrong parking spot. And right, we judge. It's just what our brains do. And the antidote's curiosity. And again, this is not an HR example, but I think everybody can relate to this one. So my mother and I were visiting my dad, and we stay with my dad in the hospital all day. And we were walking. My mother's handicapped, so we're parked in a handicapped spot. We could actually find one today. That was nice. Not all the handicapped spots were taken. And we were
Mhm.
walking behind a car, and I had watched the man get into his car, and I knew he'd be reversing, right? But I assumed he saw us. Everyone has backup cameras, all the things, right? Judgment, right? Everyone has backup cameras. Maybe not. So we're very close to the back of his car because my mom's side of the car is I had reversed it. So we were very close, and I'm straight lining because my mother cannot walk far. I have to get her to the car as quickly as I can. She has no energy. She could pass out. She could collapse. I have to get her to the car. She and I are straight lining. The car started reversing. My
Mm.
mom has high blood pressure. She got very scared.
Oh,
And
wow.
he's pulling out, but he was going so slowly. And he's in a handicapped spot too, right? He's in a handicapped spot. We are outside the ICU at Aspen Valley Hospital. And
Oh,
I started knocking so hard on his back window, and he stopped and he pulled forward. And my mom, bless her heart, she's scared,
yeah.
totally scared. And she got mad.
I've been there.
I have been there too. When I get scared, I get mad.
I do too.
So funny. And I try to explain that to my partner, Brett. I'm like, babe, when I'm mad, I'm actually scared. He's like, whatever. I'm like, it's true. It's so true. And I watched it happen with my mom today, but because I wasn't and I was between her and the car, right? So I kind of would have been want to get pummeled, but I was just, my knuckles hurt. I banged so hard. And
Oh man.
my brain went to, okay, he's old. I don't know what's going on with him. I don't know why he didn't see us, but it wasn't intentional. So
Yeah.
I was able to stay like calm, cool, and collected, which is not always the case with me. I get redhead, right? And my mom was just fired up and mad at this person, right? So again, I am I mean, I have both of my parents, judgmental genes coming in. And I think it's because, like you said, I have practiced this skill of curiosity and
Mm-hmm.
just to be curious why people are doing certain things, why they're saying certain things, why they're not using their backup camera. I have really worked hard to get curious because it also makes, I mean, it's, I don't want to say selfish, but it's because I want to be happy. And when I'm judgmental, I don't like myself. When
Yeah.
I'm curious about other people at work or in my personal life, I'm just happier. It gives them the space to show up differently versus like, especially if I'm like coming down hard on somebody, if an employee is just late all the time and just leading with that, oh, they're going to be late again today. Well,
Yeah.
what if they were escorting their handicapped parent and they got hit by a car today? Maybe that's why the employee's late today. And just really leading with that curiosity instead of that assumption or that judgment of why they're late. It's just such a game changer. For me, it helps my mental and my emotional health.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I'm so devoted to this practice of curiosity because I'm happier.
Yeah.
Just
I, yeah, I,
don't know.
to everything you said, I would say absolutely yes. And I do think just that from that place of curiosity to have greater awareness of the truth, right? You have greater awareness of what truly is versus the assumption making. And, all of that creates so much anxiety. It creates a lot of angst that we're just not fully aware of a lot. And
Yeah.
so through curiosity, it can help bring down the angst because now you know, right?
I
We
know.
don't have to be playing with all of these what ifs and all of that can be cleansed.
Mm. Oh, a cleansing. We all need a cleansing every now and
Let's
again.
cleanse through curiosity. That's a good webinar title.
Oh, that's a really good one.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I know we've talked about strategies within ourselves. Do you have a strategy to help organizationally, like cultivating that skill of curiosity within the organization?
Yeah, I really do. My boss and I have been talking more and more, and it's so funny because here's here's where I have to be vulnerable a little bit and say,
Oh,
I'm confident in so many ways, but when it comes to like role playing and doing things that get me out of my comfort zone, and it's
yep.
so interesting the things that get I can public speak all day every day,
Yes.
but when it comes to role playing and trying to pretend to be something different,
Ooh.
I struggle.
Oh,
And
tell me about
so my boss has been really talking a lot about some science that he's seen around how to really help with behavior change. And a lot of that has to do with the practicing real time through role playing.
that. Yep.
And, when we talk about practice, 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 the role playing concept is something that he's really pushing me into, and I'm not comfortable with it, but I got it. I know that it's gonna help. And I think that the idea being that if you really want to practice curiosity, doing so in a role playing type of way when it's non-threatening, it's safe, right? It's really just
Mm,
getting out of your own heads
yep.
initially to get over the stage fright of doing something different. But really, if I'm being truly, truly honest with myself, I think there is like some self-protection that's happening
Yep.
that I just have to kind of break free of. So yeah, I think practicing and doing
Yes.
so and that being something that's supported in an organizational environment. And what I have noticed more and more,
Mm,
especially since COVID, and it's so interesting, we've kind of gone backwards where people are now, not as comfortable with a lot of in-person, meetings or a lot of
ooh.
engaging type of team building. I've seen more of a pushing away of that. And that could just be me on the West Coast here in Oregon. But I've seen more of that than I'd seen in the past. And I think it's important to be the change as HR professionals, to be the change around that, to really get people engaging more with one another, and to really try to pull out ways that we can practice curiosity in group settings. That was my long answer, but
I love that answer though. It's like being the change you want to see in the organization,
yeah,
and modeling that behavior. It's just classic. And developing that skill of curiosity on your own and showing people how to do it, whether it's through role playing, whatever that is. I love that.
yeah.
So
And
powerful.
so, yeah, because I know that that's not something that's a strength for me, I'm loving that, right?
Yes.
I'm loving now that it's going to force me into pushing through that while I'm simultaneously going to be asking the same of those around me. And that's one of the things when it comes to our own growth, when you can do something like that collectively, especially when you're trying to build trust, you're trying to build safety amongst groups and teams. There's no better way to do it than actually being willing to be right there with them when it comes to change. Ooh, we're coming back to change.
I love that. I love that. You're like hip to hip, right alongside them.
Yes,
We're doing this together.
totally. Yeah. And that, I think there's no better strategy in my mind when it comes to being able to help with organizational change than being willing to find something that you're willing to get in and ride with them on. And so that's where I'm at right now here today, at my work. And so how cool it is to be able to say that I real time am seeing that work pretty, in a pretty incredible way. So, well, what about you? Like, where do you think in terms of the listeners in the organizational setting, where do you see curiosity making an impact?
I mean, my answer is a little bit different. It's more scaffolding than a strategy. But one of the guiding principles of an organization that I've been working with, we have a 72-hour rule. And meaning if there is conflict, if there's judgment going on, if there are two executives who are not able to communicate in a professional way, they're in conflict, they're really, really mad at each other. Within 72 hours, it gives you time to cool off. It gives you time to think about what you want to say, how you want to say it, how you want to present yourself in a very, very curious way. And then within 72 hours, you got to have the conversation, and you got to clean it up, and you got to fix it, and you got to move forward, and you have to learn. So the way that it's, in some ways you could see it as like forced curiosity, but it just stops the rumor mill. It stops the judgment mill. It stops really bad behavior in an organization. It stops the gossip.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly, right? It gives people enough time to calm down. And that was, I personally would recommend more of a 48-hour approach.
Well, I was going to ask, I'm like, may I ask why 72 hours? Is there a reason?
Yes. I love the curiosity that you've just exhibited. Amazing. It was what we came up at an executive retreat. It was what we came up as collectively, because some people wanted it to be longer. Some people wanted it to be shorter. And we just said, okay, 72 hours. And that way everybody felt heard. So I do a lot of customized coaching. I facilitate conversations. I make sure everyone's heard. And then we come up with the decision together. So that's what worked best for that particular organization.
Okay.
In my personal life, I mean, with Brett and I, it's we're going to sleep on it, and then we're going to talk about it the next day.
That's great. I think the rule is really reasonable. I mean, what do they say in terms of being able to feel an emotion? If you're really truly aware, it should take no more than 90 seconds. So if if we really need to sleep on it, I think that's more than fair.
Yeah.
But 72 hours, that feels a little
It
long.
feels
But
a little long.
I totally get in the work environments, especially for those who aren't quite there yet in terms of how quickly they can get past
Yeah.
the triggers.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God, I love that. Well, what about one tip for our listeners that you have when it comes to this powerful skill of curiosity? What would you like to leave our listeners with? One little nugget.
Hmm. I think the one thing I would leave everyone with is it is a process, and I think that the biggest thing I would say is to really practice grace around what curiosity brings up for us, because I think why curiosity is so hard for so many is because the truth of the matter is when we don't know it all, when we don't have all the answers, it really requires a level of vulnerability that is it can be really uncomfortable, and it can really start to uncover things that are icky. And so having grace means I'm going to really be curious from such a way that I'm going to detach from the self judgment, the self criticism,
Ooh.
self blame, all of the things that come up, because I think that truly for me, that's the greatest risk that curiosity carries, is that the
Ah.
truth of the matter is I'm going to really uncover and see that perhaps I'm really the problem, and
Mm.
so I think that journey for me has really been about like truly being okay with absolutely anything and everything that comes up. And just yeah, and again, you and I have talked about it so many times about the reality of, how we can go through the emotions of what might come up that doesn't feel good, because from curiosity, from that truth that comes through, the stinging is not going to be pleasant always. So
Mm.
yeah, I think it's just a matter of I'm going to bring it back around to grace, because the only way you're truly going to reach the path of finding out who you really are and what this is all really all about, right, is having the grace of being able to be okay with what comes up through the process of curiosity. And that is at work, and that is at home, and that is in every aspect of my life now. It's just something that I'm working through always, always, always. And you too, I know, is, through the process that we've gone, through, this is the continuous calling. If
Yeah.
it's the calling. So, and curiosity is part of the game. I do not get a pass on curiosity anymore just because it's inconvenient.
Oh my God. Quote of the year. That's so good. I don't get a pass on curiosity because it's convenient.
Yeah.
Whoa. I'm
Yeah.
going to write that on my back.
I should
But
write
it's
some of
going to
that.
say Jen Trumm. Quote by Jen Trumm.
All right, we'll have to let Sam know. We do get no passes on curiosity because of
No passes. You know what's so funny, Jen? I'm a little opposite when it comes to that, because when I dig into self-curiosity and I find out I'm the root cause, I'm pumped because I know
yeah.
I can change me. It's like, oh, that's what I'm doing to contribute to this situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's a blind spot I've never seen before. And I'm psyched. I
Yeah.
actually it's so interesting because I have the opposite effect when I'm like, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And I realize it's out of my control because I think I'm a control freak. And when I realize it's like, I can't change that other person. I can't change the way they see me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I know I can show up as my best version of myself, but if somebody else doesn't have that practice of curiosity or even that knowledge to be curious about the thoughts that they're choosing about me, about somebody else, that's where I get a little, I mean, I feel out of control, and I want to control and I want to fix it. So it's so funny you bring that up because I'm like, oh man, I love it when that happens. I love when it's me.
Well, yeah, there's a certain level of freedom that can come from that release, right? Of just letting go.
Yeah.
But I totally get what you're saying. Like, I think the happy, the happiness factor that we can get from really being able to not have that, attachment over what we can't control.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so tricky, especially for me, because I think, and probably everybody, but I mean, where I get myself caught up is I'm always challenging myself. Did you lean in enough? Were you curious enough? And
Yeah.
are you giving yourself grace? Are you then, taking that step back? Because I think, it can all be, really fun and exciting. And I'm also trying to find that balance with, like you had said earlier, where's my lesson? Where's my lesson? What do I have to learn here? And so that's kind of, that going through the cycle and actually being okay with the ebbs and flows that comes through the process of just allowing.
Mm. I'm ending the episode on that process of allowing, because you have had so many gold nuggets in the last 5 minutes.
Oh
My tip
man.
for our listeners is to listen to Jen's wisdom the last 5 minutes. If you're short on time, go for the last 5 minutes of this episode. Jen just spewed some serious gold throughout the episode, but really in the last 5 minutes was gold. Jen, you're
Well,
amazing.
maybe next episode we'll actually have a viewer or two now that we're back doing this live. I know we have the listeners with the podcast, but we're going to have to build up those viewers again, and then we can
I
do real
know.
time with everybody. It's going to be so much fun,
I
y'all.
saw people popping in and out. I think we caught people off guard with going live for the first time in 6 months.
Yeah,
It's been a
months.
while. Yeah, I love
Really
doing the
fun.
live. So I'm so glad we're gonna bring it back. And Jen, thank you so much for this evening. Thank you for your vulnerability, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you for your golden nuggets and your wisdom. And just a reminder to everyone, please, 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 if you got something out of today and you think it's worthwhile to share it with somebody, please do. Please download, please rate, please review, please whatever. I don't even know the technical terms.
All the things and stuff.
All the things. Share it. And please, please, please remember that every single day is a great day to thrive and shine in HR. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.